My dad, he did things a certain way, and when I started with him, he gave me 3 rules. He said,
there are very few other people I can speak to who are in the same position that I am, that where you go and work with your dad and then you take over running the business as well.
but on the 92nd floor there, you are literally above the clouds.
Welcome to the latest edition of our podcast, Navigating with Bertie Russell. And today we have a very exciting venue and guest. Today we are in New York City, and I'm really proud to introduce you to the managing partner, Jed Garfield of Leslie Garfield, our new partners in New York.
Thank you very much, Bertie.
Welcome.
And we're thrilled to be partners with you as well. It's a wonderful opportunity, hopefully for both of us.
Yeah, I hope so. I would love you to start just telling us a little bit about Leslie Garfield.
Sure. So the firm was started in 1972 by my father, Leslie Garfield. And he started out having worked at a couple of different old line New York firms prior to that, and made a specialty of dealing in the sale of townhouses. That became his sort of moniker. At a point, I think one of the big magazines referred to him as the Dean of Townhouse Brokers. And we've sort of stuck to that since then. I started working with Leslie in the late 1980s while I was going to graduate school at Columbia. And I really started with him because I didn't know what else to do. He said, if you'd like, I'd love to have you in the office a couple of days a week. And I continued really in that same vein of selling townhouses. And since that time, we've expanded from what had originally been a smaller boutique covering primarily the Upper East Side to a firm that covers virtually all of Manhattan, starting up in Harlem, all the way down to the tip of Manhattan, and then out to Brooklyn. I think the thing that has allowed us to continue to be a significant player in the upper end of the real estate market in New York City is by specializing in a single thing. And we don't pretend to be all things to all people. And we do try and know this specific market of townhouses, hopefully just a little bit better than our competition. As we like to say, we're not big. In fact, we're small, but we're very big within the space of what we sell.
It's been fascinating for me spending the last few days here. And I think in London, we're very used to lots of townhouses and less high-rise apartments.
Yeah.
And the first moment I got here, the biggest thing for me was my neck was just craned up.
Yeah.
And I couldn't believe how high some of these buildings were. And I suppose I had always imagined that Manhattan was filled with these super high-rise apartments. And you sort of see in a few movies these amazing townhouses, but don't quite ever imagine where they might be. So it's been a really cool adventure seeing.
Well, I think it's always a really interesting market. I think that, these super high rises, which are really something that have come about over the last maybe 20 to 25 years, are sort of a new invention. We always had in New York City, buildings that were 12, 15 stories tall. Most of the old pre-war buildings on Park Avenue, I think a very big building on Park Avenue is maybe 18 stories.
Okay.
But now with developers found that by building bigger and taller buildings, they were able to sell incredibly expensive apartments. And it all became about views. And of course, if you need views, you always need to be taller than everybody around you. And so there's a very large building on Park Avenue at 432 Park Avenue that's got some, I wouldn't say provenance, but it's got some fame to it. And I described it to my partner, Rick Pretzfelder, as being iconic. And he wisely said, Jed, it's not iconic, it's just big. And I think that that's very true of a lot of it's not to say that there aren't some terrific, high-rise buildings, but a lot of them are sort of heartless, soulless, huge and expensive.
How high are they? How high is that one?
432 Park is 92 stories.
Wow.
So, I mean, it literally, and I've sold a couple of, it's interesting. We do specialize in the sale of townhouses, but every year or so I sell one or two apartments just by default. But on the 92nd floor there, you are literally above the clouds. And
really?
so you'll go up to 92 and you'll look around and it's almost, you're in another world.
Wow.
I mean, particularly on a cloudy day, because you've got cloud level and then you've got these apartments and you're looking out. There's not a whole lot else there.
Extraordinary.
It is extraordinary. It's extraordinary. I mean, I would think One Hyde Park stands out, or not quite.
It stands out, but we're just not allowed to build that high. Colleagues of mine went into the Shard yesterday and they sent some pictures, knowing that we were here. They sent some pictures of the views of these apartments that we're hopefully going to rent.
Right.
And they have some extraordinary views. But One Hyde Park's 8 or 9 stories high.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Huh.
And it has amazing views. And I think for London, the buildings are so protected that it's very rare that you can actually build a high rise in London. And one of your colleagues was telling me that New York City is a stone foundation.
It is.
And London is a clay foundation.
Right.
So the concept of building a 92-story building in the sort of residential parts where we work is
not going to happen.
It's not going to happen. And it's just, it's extraordinary to think it's even possible. I'm fascinated. So if this has really changed in the last 20 to 30 years and your dad started in the 70s, what was it like then?
There was always a couple of different buyers in the market. I mean, there are obviously thousands of buyers in the market, but there were people who really sought privacy. And that was always the buyer of the townhouse. They neither wanted the very quote unquote good buildings in New York City were these cooperative buildings. And in order to get into a cooperative, it's very similar to just getting into a club. One needed references and one needed to disclose a lot about one's financials. And the reason, I guess, and by extension, people would quote unquote be rejected by co-ops and they couldn't get in. So the townhouses really became a default, both for people who wanted privacy, who wanted no interaction with their neighbors, who wanted not to disclose anything about their finances to anybody. And quite frankly, they were people who maybe weren't going to ever get into a co-op, into a good building. There's a very famous pornographer, businessman, a guy named Bob Guccione, who started Penthouse magazine, which I don't know if your viewers know what this is, but years ago it was one of the original, sort of blue magazines that were out there. And he made a vast fortune, but he couldn't get into any of the big buildings, really? Even though he was worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And so by default...
So he had the money, but he didn't have the provenance, the
exactly,
reputation.
Exactly.
Really?
And so he ended up buying 2 adjoining houses on East 67th Street between 5th and Madison Avenue. And I only use that as an example of, it's not to say that anyone who owns townhouses are in the pornography business, but it is to say that anyone who buys townhouses, for the most part, are making a conscious decision that they don't want to be part of a club per se, and they do want their privacy. And I think that and having outdoor space are the 2 things that traditionally got people into that space. Also, historically, on a price per square foot basis, townhouses were just always a much better deal because you didn't have maintenances or common charges, which one does have in most of these apartment buildings.
What's it been like working with your dad?
Absolutely fantastic. My dad he did things a certain way. And when I started with him, he gave me 3 rules. He said, I don't want you to get into the office after I do, which at the time was 7:30 in the morning. He said, don't lie to customers. He said, it's just a bad idea. He said, it's not that I'm so moral or ethical, but he said, you're going to forget and you're going to get into trouble. And he said, and work hard. And those were really words to live by and things that I've shared with anybody who started with me because I think it makes sense. All of it. Oh, I'm sorry. And the last one was I had to wear a suit and tie.
Really?
Because A, it's what he did. And I still believe that if both of us, are earning six-figure fees, occasionally seven-figure fees. The least you can do is show up in a suit and tie.
I'm very pleased I'm wearing a suit and tie today.
I mean, it's that, but it was also more than that, is that, I'm very, very fortunate in that Leslie had a terrific reputation. And to some degree, I've drafted off that for years. It's not that I haven't worked hard. I did do all the things that he suggested, and I've worked very hard over the years. But I think it certainly made my career easier.
Having him there.
Yeah. And being able to poke my head into his office and saying, Leslie or Dad, I made a mistake, or I'm stuck. What do I do? And he always seemed to have some kind of solution.
It's interesting talking to you. There are very few other people I can speak to who are in the same position that I am, where you go and work with your dad and then you take over running the business as well.
Well, Bertie, that's why I'm so pleased. I mean, it really does feel like a good combination of the two of us, is that we both are second generation. We both had fathers who were tremendously successful and sort of built up a brand and built up a wealth of goodwill, both in the industry and with their customers who they've dealt with. And part of our job and part of their legacy is that we need to continue to hopefully live up to that, not screw things up. I mean that very literally.
Well, that's exactly what I'm for 16 years, I've just been trying to not screw it up.
Yeah, exactly. Well, me too.
Alan's reputation is so amazing, and I just don't want to mess that up.
Right. I feel the exact same way, Bertie. And it is so easy to do. And you and I both deal with a lot of brokers in our business, you in London and me in New York, who are ethically challenged. And it becomes and which isn't to say they're not very successful, because they are. But I think that having the shared background that we have, we probably both hold ourselves up to a slightly higher standard, or maybe even much higher standard than some of our competitors.
It's an interesting thing to try to communicate to people that work with us. As we grow, we want to continue those values and those ethics that we hold so strong. And for us, and me and my siblings have worked with Dad for many years, it was those values and those ethics and that reputation was so much more important than any fast money that you might make from telling someone something you shouldn't. And we've done that now for so long that it's the only thing we know. And I think that as we're nearly 40 people now, and there are, I think, people coming to join us know that reputation in the market.
Well, I think you've touched on something, both as it relates to growth and to being in the business a long time, which is, I think we both have this notion of both what our fathers did and the way we'd like to continue running the business, but then culturally fitting in the next person, fitting in the next negotiator, for us fitting in the next broker. Because as much as you'd like to get that broker who's generating millions of pounds or millions of dollars a year in fees, that might not necessarily be the best fit to fit in with everybody else. And that, I think, is maybe the biggest challenge, certainly for us as it relates to growth, finding the right fit culturally. And you guys have a wonderful, it's terrific the way you have all of your siblings working together and still have your father.
Yeah.
And the fact that you all get along and make money doing it is really impressive.
Well, I think when you're younger, you maybe to make money and be successful, you have to be a bit horrible sometimes.
Yeah.
And we often get told we're too nice and we're too soft. And I always thought that was a real weakness, because if you're going to run a business or you're going to grow a business, you need to be a bit cutthroat and a bit aggressive.
Yeah.
And we just ultimately don't want to be like that. We don't want to sleep. We want to sleep well at night, knowing we've tried our absolute best and cared for everyone around us, all of our colleagues and even our competitors. We're really close with a lot of our competitors. And I think the benefit I have, and I'm sure you have, is having seen Alan work for 50 years, and the business keeps coming back to him. People keep referring him and wanting to come back and use him again. And he, people talk about his black book, Alan hasn't got a black book. He's
Right.
never written any of this stuff down. But
Right.
people, they remember so fondly of him that they keep calling him.
We've lost maybe one very good broker over the years, and he was just ethically challenged, and we got to a point where we had to make a decision. And it was a very difficult decision to make. I mean, he was a very successful broker. And again, my partner, Rick, or maybe it was Matthew Lesser, my other partner, who said, we just need to make a quick cut and be done with it. And it's gonna hurt for a little while, but we'll move on and it'll be better. And at the time it sounded like very empty. And I was like, I don't know, I think that's sort of maybe like not accurate, but like this is gonna be really bad. But a year and a half has gone by, and sure enough, things are okay. Yeah. And I think we can continue to operate in the way that we've operated. I take great pride in the fact that nobody in my office has ever been brought up. I don't know if you have an equivalent trade association in London, but we have something called Real Estate Board of New York. Okay. And they've got an ethics committee. Okay. And nobody in my office has ever been up in front of the ethics committee. I actually sit on the ethics committee. Oh, so really? I see some of the people that come and go, and there's some really bad actors out there. I mean, people do things that you're sort of shocked, stunned.
But it doesn't stop people from doing it.
Ever. No, it just goes on and on.
Yeah, we don't have anything like that. So no one's licensed. On residential side, no one is licensed. There are no exams you have to take.
Well, there are, but they're shockingly. The barriers to entry
is low.
I mean, really, really low. I mean, the exams themselves, I would think if you've got a high school degree, you can probably pass them. And they're also very obvious. Why? Are they more challenging where you're coming from?
We don't have any.
Oh, you don't have any?
No. So if you're a commercial broker, commercial agent, mm-hmm. there are pretty tough exams to pass.
Right.
But for residential, the barrier to entry is nothing.
Huh. Do you have any licensing?
No.
Literally anybody can walk in off the street?
Anyone. So we're regulated. We're regulated for certain things, the business.
Right.
But the brokers, negotiators, salespeople, they're anyone can come and do it.
So how do you deal with bad actors in your business? Or I mean, you're just like, oh, that's too bad, and maybe we'll try not to do business with them?
It's a very collaborative industry, as I'm sure it is here. So if someone's going to bring in we act for our clients, the sellers and the landlords of properties. And if you're selling your house or renting your apartment in London, if a bad apple brings in a good buyer, you probably still want to sell to them.
Of course.
So I mean, we're very friendly with everybody. And to be honest, the area where we work in, the higher value parts of our industry, the bad apples get pushed aside,
right?
And they don't end up lasting for very long, because a lot of our business is word of mouth, and it's reputation and it's trust.
Yeah.
So we've got some really great people in our industry, and we work with all of them really. So it's sort of fine, but I think for the entire industry across the UK, which I don't have massive exposure to, we don't have the greatest reputation, and I think it would be great to be able to have some code of ethics, some code of how it works, which everyone has to pass. I think it would be brilliant.
Overall, I think that more regulation is better than less regulation as it relates to the ethics in our business. Yeah. When you think about hiring new people, is it people that just come off the street? Is it people you've gone to school with? Is it friends of friends? I mean, the benefit in being in the market is we know, and we've dealt with a lot of the people, mm-hmm. and so we know their reputation. I mean, for us, the cultural fit is so important for us. Yeah. People that align with our values, and obviously people that know the area and have a track record of doing the business. Right.
But no, sometimes we use recruiters. Sometimes we know people. Depends on different roles.
Yeah, I think certainly for us, it's always been, it's very challenging finding people, but I think something that we have done, which has worked pretty well, is for the most part, we don't hire laterally. For the most part, we hire people right out of school and we train them so that at least, well, at a minimum, we feel that we are appropriately, training them and teaching the things that we want to see.
Setting the tone.
Yeah,
set the tone, yeah,
exactly.
And you've got a bit of family in your business as well.
I do. At a point, there were a bunch of us, but at this point, I still have 2 cousins. But I actually feel about my office that my office is my second family.
Yeah.
And while my cousin Matthew Pravda, who started out as my assistant, and who has grown into a superstar broker down here in the West Village, and my cousin Lydia Rosengarten, who, has been working on the Upper East Side with me for years. I mean, they're really good. But Rick Pretzfelder, one of my partners, I've known him since we were freshmen at university. And my other partner, Matt Lesser, who's an amazing salesman, went to the same university as I did, same college as I did. And this has been the only job he's ever had.
Brilliant.
We have very, very little turnover, and I like that. By the way, it may ultimately be to our detriment, but I think it's an environment. Well, I know it's an environment I want to be in.
Yeah.
It may not be the most lucrative, but it's pretty darn good. And I really like continuity, and I really trust these guys too. So it's a pretty good place to be.
Yeah, it feels like a great place. Yeah, it's been nice meeting all of you.
Right, we do. I think we have a really nice group of people. Yeah. Hopefully that continues.
What were you looking for in a partner?
We were regularly competing with well-known New York names, which were this company called Corcoran, a company called Douglas Elliman, and some business we'd get and some business we wouldn't get. But I was always, particularly early on in my career, I wanted every piece of business. And I would call an owner and say, I know you didn't hire us, but why not? And he would say, well, you guys are terrific at what you do, but you don't have an international presence. Yeah. And that's really what drove it. And at the very beginning of the internet, I went online and I looked up boutique London agencies because I wanted to find someone who was a good complement. And
London's a good place.
It is. So London seemed like the perfect place to have a partner. So much of our business, and I think your business too, Bertie, is based on sort of, the city of London and Wall Street and private equity, hedge funds are still certainly in New York City, 85% of the market. We had a partner initially who was fine, but there wasn't a lot of back and forth. It was really just more name only. And I think when we started connecting and through our conversations and discussions, it feels much more of that pick up the phone, call somebody in London, rather than like just advertising that we've got an overseas presence. And that really makes a huge difference. Not just for us, but I think truly for our clients and customers, being able to speak intelligently to people who own townhouses in New York about the London market, and hopefully vice versa.
Yeah.
So it both in size and attitude, it feels to me that Garfield and Russell Simpson are a very good combination. And we'll see. I mean, hopefully you feel the same way. I mean, it's not a guarantee of more business, but I think it is a guarantee of greater professionalism and greater market knowledge, which can't hurt.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really excited about it. I think the essence of it for us is we want to provide the best service for our client, just as you said. And if 10, 15, 20% of buyers, tenants are coming from the US and from New York with this financial sort of partnership, then it can't hurt.
It can't hurt. And, even as it relates to our marketing, we're sending out market updates, listings regularly to our, I don't know, 20,000 person mailing list of people who own townhouses, just very literally being able to offer them some spots in London or some market knowledge of London is going to be good.
Yeah,
it is.
I mean, we've found opening a second office, and for some of the big companies, this is something they've known for years. But for us, opening a second office, even in London, a mile away from each other, having data and information just from a different neighbourhood, is so valuable.
Oh.
And I know you have the same, but to be able to have, after COVID, places like Belgravia and Knightsbridge in London were very quiet. And I think a lot of the agents who only focused on that area were like, wow, our industry is finished.
Right.
But we found up in Notting Hill and Kensington, where there were bigger gardens, it was crazy. It was super busy. And so for us to have the data from there and give that confidently to our clients in Belgravia and Knightsbridge to say, the market hasn't gone. Obviously, people are wanting more gardens and a bit more space at the moment,
right,
but it will come back.
Yeah.
Whereas before we had that other office, not to have that perspective was less professional, it's limiting. So I think it's going to be fascinating to be able to share data, and you guys do some great quarterly data reports, which I've now seen. And I think we need to. I also hope we can learn from each other. This is something I hope we'll learn from you on this. And yeah,
I would hope so. I do think that at times I look at the data and I look at the amount of time and energy we spend. We've got some wonderful people in the office. Morgan Garofalo, I think is how it's pronounced, and Sophie Smadbeck, and these younger people in the office, just their ability to collect and put together data and present it in a way that's readable and not shockingly dull is, it makes a big difference. It really does. And since we opened our second office out on Montague Street in Brooklyn, that's really made a difference, because any of our high net worth clients, customers, everyone wants to know about real estate. And the more information and the more granular information you can provide for them, the more they're going to think when they do pick up the phone to make a sale, that they'll, at a minimum, as I always say to people, look, some business you're going to get, some business you're not going to get. But at a minimum, you want to be in the mix.
Yeah.
Because that's as good as it gets for any of us. Yeah. And I think that by having all of this tremendous data and reputation, but having this data really does make a difference for people. And it's a way for us both to set ourselves apart from these huge behemoths. We both, in that sense, are forever battling. I'm not sure who. I think you have Knight Frank and Savills and Sotheby's as well. All of these huge entities. But I think what we try and do is make clear to people that that's a name, and it's ultimately about the individual. And if you've got good individuals, you'll continue to prosper, hopefully.
Yeah, the people are very, very important. Can you quickly give me a rundown on your favorite areas of Manhattan?
Or you're
probably biased.
I am biased. I'm a lifelong New Yorker. I grew up in a townhouse on 91st Street off Park Avenue. My brother and I used to play out in the street and literally like throw a ball or play catch or play football or something, literally in the street, which is something that you just can't do anymore. So I would say that as much as I still love the Upper East Side, I actually think there are parts of Brooklyn that are really still great places to be. I don't know. I really like all of it. New York City, much like London and maybe Paris and maybe Tokyo, young people want to be there. They're vibrant. They're happening. And, even through COVID, when things looked their most dire, great cities come back. And hopefully we, who to some degree are involved in the process of, keeping real estate moving, are part of that.
For me, which I'm sure a lot of this audience will be from London, but
Yeah.
it is the same amount of people live here as London. I think it's about 4 times smaller. So the density of people, and that's why the high rises allow that to happen,
Right.
is much greater. Very few people drive, from what I can tell, although it's still quite busy out there.
No, you're right. I think you're right. Statistically.
Yeah. Central Park is 2.5 times bigger than our Hyde Park, Kensington Gardens.
Huh.
It took me an hour and a half to ride around the whole thing last night.
But lucky you. Isn't that a great ride?
It was great.
I mean, it's really...
the lakes.
Did you get a city bike or did you...
I got a city bike.
Did you get...
It was electric bike.
Oh, you got the electric one.
I was feeling a bit
which
tired
is great
after.
when you get up to the top of the park, isn't it?
hilly.
That's a big hill.
And the rocks and it's more it's a bit more like our Richmond Park.
Yeah.
It's a bit more wild, and because it's built on rock, there are outcrops of rock everywhere, and the lakes are huge.
Huge. Yeah.
It's there's a fantastic buzz, and I think coming here has made me realize how much I take for granted how well I know London, and I think doing our job you really, really get to know the neighbourhoods so well, and you get to know the types of people that live in the types of neighbourhoods, which I just took for granted. And when I walk around here and asking all your colleagues, they've been amazing, by the way. They've shown us, they've taken loads of time, and they've given us extraordinary sort of walking tours.
Right.
This is who lives here. This is the type of person. These what all of these valued.
That, by the way, you are touching on something I take tremendous pride in. And one of the things that I think absolutely sets us apart from our competitors is because of the way our office is set up, everybody covers specific neighborhoods, that when they're out showing, they can really say X lives there, Y lives there, Z lives there, and this is a great house because of this. And the exact same house across the street isn't as good of a house because it backs up on Y, or the zoning's different. And those little pieces of information, to me, make all the difference. And one of the things I really am most proud about, you touched on it, but everybody in my office, they better know those details because that's the difference.
But they love it.
Yeah.
And they care about it. I mean, Tyler took us out. He was, he showed us 2 homes, very different, beautiful homes.
Right.
And every single house. And actually, it was amazing, but I did think, if you walk with Alan around Chelsea in particular, but any part of where we work, he's been into pretty much every house.
Yeah.
And he can also, like Tyler was saying, that house looks great, but actually it's backed up against a huge hospital, and that one's got a south-facing view and it's got more open space.
Yeah.
Or that was this, and the architecture here is different. And it was brilliant.
Well, Alan and Leslie sound so similar in so many ways, but it was the same experience. You could walk up Madison Avenue or up Fifth Avenue or Park Avenue with Leslie, much like as you pointed out with Alan, and they could say to you, so-and-so lives here, so-and-so lives here. Oh, that's a great house. It's got that 2-story living room. Or, oh, the Chavarin used to live there. And I remember the story with the suitcase of cash when they were selling it. And all these fascinating, but it is.
That's great.
And it makes it makes for a great experience. And it's one of the reasons why both I take pride in it, but I'm also vaguely embarrassed as it relates to this idea of the superstar broker, is that for years and years, it wasn't about the individual broker, it was about the property. And it was about putting together a transaction that made sense for both parties. And it's always, again, at age 61, I'm always just a little baffled by the transition from it being about the property to it being about the broker.
Yeah. Well, I hope we can all keep going the way we're going.
Right, yeah, you and I both.
Yeah.
Bertie, I this is your podcast, but I really would love to hear more about your relationship with your siblings and getting the whole gang under one roof. I mean, that's a great story, and I really cannot think of anything comparable to that here in New York City.
It's pretty unusual. I mean, I think it's a massive testament to my parents.
But also to you, Bertie. I mean, you came in and one of you had to lead, and you did. And we're comfortable taking everybody in.
We're all very close. We're very similar. You were asking me the other night who my favourite sibling is. And I honestly don't have a favourite sibling. It was a good question, with Hermione sitting next to me. But we're so bizarrely similar. We've got very similar work ethic, very similar values.
Yeah.
We're super competitive as a team.
Yeah.
But we're not competitive at all against each other.
Yeah.
And I think that's the environment we really want to have in the office as well. We want everyone to be, we're nice people, but we also get the job done. And we know how to do sales, and we know how to let properties. But we don't want to be competitive against each other.
Right.
It's one of the greatest privileges I think I will ever have in my whole life, being able to work with my family. And it takes a bit of time to realize that. But as I've got a bit older and I've had my own kids, most people at the age of 18, they leave home and they are lucky if they see their parents and their siblings once a month. And that continues until you're 60, 70, 80.
Yeah.
And we have the fortune of seeing each other every day, speaking to each other every day, and really enjoying what we're doing. And I think also if you only see each other once a month or 3 times a year, you don't have to tackle any issues you might have. And we all have issues with our family members.
Of course we do.
But because our relationships are so important for the evolution and the success of our business, which also we now have a lot of responsibilities to other people as well. If we ever have a slight issue or something that crops up, we need to be able to speak about it and resolve it and improve our relationship. So I think, I'm nearly 40, and my relationship with my siblings has never been stronger. And I hope that will continue.
Well, it certainly seems, from an outsider's perspective, it certainly seems as though it would and it should. Do you foresee a next generation of Russells or Simpsons joining the... Russells. Right?
Russells, yeah. Dad never put any pressure on us to join.
Right.
And we were very exposed to it. We all worked summer holidays and Easter holidays. And
sure.
My parents have an incredible work ethic and they have great values. And I hope that I can instill those 2 things into my kids. I would love the next generation to be involved. I would love it. Right. But I don't want to put any pressure on them. So my eldest is nearly 6 and he is fascinated. He loves numbers and puzzles. And I'm really trying not to put anything in his ear.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's going to be so exposed to it because, our Christmas holidays, next year, every other year we go skiing as a whole group. So last year it was 18 of us in Austria. And out of 18, I think how many are 6 currently work in the business. So it's very difficult for them not to be exposed to it.
I understand, when I was growing up, my father worked extremely hard. He worked, 6.5 days a week. And certainly the time that I got to spend with him was I would walk down to the office with him on a Saturday and maybe he would be doing paperwork and I'd goof around on the mimeograph machine or something. And then
what's mimeograph machine?
It's a copy machine, a
Okay.
Xerox machine, which is old school. Anyway, and then we'd usually go out and do a showing or 2, and I'd sort of tag along and sort of be his little sidekick. And then my father was a passionate art collector, and then we'd often go to the galleries afterwards. But it was just sort of like there was no choice about real estate. That was baked into my blood from an early age. So quite frankly, it was the hard work. Yeah. And you see how hard your parents work, and your father, my God, 6 tuitions. That's a big bill.
He's also been working he set up Russell Simpson at 24.
Yeah.
He didn't go to university, so he started work at 19, and he's going to be 70 in January, and he has not taken a minute off.
Have you interviewed him for your podcast?
He was the first person I interviewed.
Oh, he was? Okay, good. Good.
And I think I'm going to have to do it probably annually.
But you should.
It's a great pleasure to be able to have that on record. I'm actually really pleased I'm doing this for my kids to be able to see, me
They're-
chatting and
with their grandfather.
with their grandfather.
I think it's absolutely fantastic. And, my father did record on tape some of his years of experience, but never in this format. And now with technology, blah, 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 it would just be a shame if you weren't able to capture, it would be super, I think, because I enjoyed so much chatting with your father at dinner the other night, would be just sort of a greatest hits.
Yeah.
Dad, I'd love to talk to you about, your 10 deals and not even your big deals, because the big deals are sort of like, they're nice and they're eye-popping, but it's the challenging deals and hearing about how he overcame
It's a great idea.
X or Y. I'd certainly be interested in hearing about it.
Well, I think your marketing team interviewed us yesterday and asked me what my most memorable deal was. And actually, it wasn't the biggest deal. It was the people. It was the quirky,
the crazy.
It's the crazy stuff that happens.
I remember when I first started working with Leslie, with my father, there were people who owned a house up on 91st Street, and it was a 5-unit brownstone. It was interesting, because people who lived in that building at the time weren't making a lot of money. There were 2 younger people who lived together who both worked on Wall Street, who I ultimately ended up selling like a $20 million house to years later.
Wow.
And they remembered me because they said I was always really nice when I would show the apartment. And it was like a little thing, but it really made a big difference. Yeah. And then there was another guy who without fail, I would open his apartment door up and he'd have pornography on whenever I was showing the building. And I was like, and I was really responsible at the time. I called every single tenant in advance and I said, just want you to know this is Jed Garfield from Leslie J. Garfield and Company, and I'm going to be showing the house tomorrow at 2 or something. It'd be great if
there was no pornography on.
Exactly. But there was also, I actually had a great experience. I met, there's a very nice block in Carnegie Hill on 92nd Street between 5th and Madison Avenue. And a lot of what we did and continue to do is reach out to owners. And we say, in essence, hey, do you want to sell? There's more to it than that. It's more nuanced than that. But that's in essence what it is. That's how one gets listings. That's how one gets information. Yeah. Other than referrals, obviously. And there was an owner on 92nd Street I couldn't reach, that had an unlisted phone number. And one day I walked over there and I knocked on the front door, and I was mortified. I was like, I can't believe I'm doing this, but I did. I knocked on the front door, and at the time these people had a butler. And he said, yes, can I help you? And I said, I was wondering if Mrs. Ammett is in. And he said, yeah, hang on a sec. And Mrs. Ammett came to the front door and I said, my name's Jed Garfield, and I wanted to know if you might have any interest in selling the property. And she said, wow. She said, great timing. She said, my husband's talking to Douglas Elliman and Sotheby's right now. Here's his number at the office.
Wow.
And I called him at the office, and I literally called him 22 times in one day. The secretary said, listen, Ted's busy right now, but he'd love to talk to you. Feel free to call back. Called. That night, Karen and I, my wife and I, were driving up to Massachusetts, and my flip phone rang at about 7:30 at night. And it was this guy, Ted Ammon. And he said, yeah, hi, this is Ted. What can I do for you? And I said, well, if you're going to be selling the house, I'd love the business. And he said, these other 2 firms want 6%. And I said, I'll do it for 5. And he said, great. He said, do we need any paper on this? And I said, not from my perspective. And he said, great. He said, you're hired. I subsequently sold this guy and or his wife 5 townhouse properties. Really? And it was all based upon a single knock on the door, which I'm still embarrassed when I think about me knocking on that door. Wow. Who wants to do that? Go to a total stranger and knock on their door?
But it worked in that.
in that particular case at work, that story actually had sort of a very tragic ending. Ultimately, Ted and Generosa Ammon both died. Generosa's boyfriend was found guilty of murdering Ted.
No way.
And inherited this vast fortune that he had as a partner at KKR. And then within like 3 months, Generosa died of breast cancer. And the boyfriend he's still in prison, a guy named Danny Pelosi.
Wow.
And you can look all this stuff up on the internet.
You need a book.
And it was, but in terms of, that's probably like my best story.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it was like my best transaction. I still
the most memorable story. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely like if people are like telling me a story about real estate, that's kind of my go-to.
Wow.
And it was also a great example of these people had so much money. I mean, I don't know what a KKR partner was making at the time, but it was a lot. And it was never enough. And I think one of the nice things, again, of what you and I both do is because of the type of real estate we sell, we're for the most part dealing with very successful people who in and of themselves have great stories.
That's so interesting. Yeah, it's the people. For me, the people is the properties are great, but the people are fascinating.
Yeah,
they're really fascinating. Jed, I don't want to take up too much of your time because I know you've got to go and do some deals. But thank you so much for
that's the hope.
Having a chat.
Thank you. Please, Bertie, this was terrific.
Thank you.
It's really been fun.
Well, we're so excited to be here, and we can't wait for this to
flourish.
flourish. Yeah. Thank you.
That'd be great. Please, thank you.